My name is Nora Delgado. I'm 30 years old, and at 2:13 on a wet Thursday morning, my sister grabbed my wrist in the emergency department at St. Catherine Medical Center and told me not to embarrass her. The automatic doors were still sighing open behind the paramedics. Rainwater shone on the tile. The air smelled like antiseptic, metal, and burnt coffee that had been sitting on a warmer too long. My father's belt buckle knocked softly against the side rail of the gurney every time they hit a seam in the floor. One of the monitors gave a sharp, ugly chirp, then another. Camille's nails dug half moons into my skin. "Don't do this tonight," she hissed. Mascara had smudged under her eyes, but somehow she still looked expensive. Gold hoops, cream silk blouse. Heels she should not have been wearing in an ER. "Do not put yourself in the middle of this and pretend you work here." I looked at her hand on my wrist, then at my own badge clipped to navy scrubs still damp at the collar from rain and sweat. Before I could say a word, one of the residents called from Trauma 3. "Nora, I need that room turned over now." Camille followed my gaze down to my badge. I watched her read it. Nora Delgado, RN, BSN, CEN, charge nurse, emergency services. Her face changed so fast it was almost sound. First blank, then wrong, then pale. And standing there under those fluorescent lights, with my father gasping behind her and her husband's family watching from the waiting area, I knew the lie she had fed people for 6 years was finally about to die where everyone could see it. If you've ever been the quiet daughter in a loud family, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I always want to know who's out there hearing this. Now let me take you back. I grew up in Pasadena, just outside Houston, in a one-story house that always smelled faintly like hairspray, fried onions, and the oil my father carried home from the body shop no matter how hard my mother scrubbed his work shirts. Our street had chain-link fences, half-dead hibiscus bushes, and pickup trucks that sat on cinder blocks for months, like everyone was waiting for a miracle that needed a little more time. In August, the air was so heavy it felt wet. In winter, the house clicked and sighed because the windows didn't seal right. We weren't poor enough for anybody to feel sorry for us, but we were never stable enough to breathe. My father, Hector Delgado, believed 2 things more than he believed in God. First, that appearances mattered. Second, that being respected mattered more than being loved. He was a man who ironed his jeans to go to the grocery store. He liked polished boots, a clean driveway, and family photos where everybody looked like they knew how to behave. He would say, "People don't see sacrifice, mija. They see results." What he meant was that struggle was only respectable if it ended in something shiny. My mother, Lucinda, cared about softness and presentation in a different way. She believed women survived by being pleasing, not happy. Pleasing. Pretty enough. Charming enough. Agreeable enough. Well-dressed enough. She kept ceramic angels on top of the fridge, wrapped gifts with curling ribbon even when the gift was cheap, and talked about certain women in our church as if their whole moral worth could be read from their lipstick. Then there was Camille. Camille is 3 years older than me, and from the beginning she was the kind of beautiful that made adults lean forward. Honey brown hair, easy smile, long legs, quick laugh. She knew how to look at people like she was giving them something. She knew how to turn a room toward herself before she was old enough to spell the word attention. When relatives came over, they pinched her cheeks and called her a movie star. When they saw me standing beside her, they usually said, "And this one is the smart one." It sounded like praise. It wasn't. Being the smart one in my family meant being useful and quiet. It meant nobody asked if I wanted the front seat because I was the one who would say, "It's okay." It meant I could be handed grocery bags, smaller portions, more chores, less softness. It meant if Camille forgot, I remembered. If Camille cried, I fixed. If Camille sparkled, I faded into a shape around her. I learned to become easy before I learned long division. I can prove that family hierarchy in scenes so small they still make my chest tighten. When I was 9, I made a water filtration project for the school science fair out of gravel, cotton, charcoal, and 2-liter bottles my father brought home from the shop. I worked on it for weeks at the kitchen table, elbows tucked in, tongue against my teeth, labeling each layer in careful block letters with a black marker. The night before the fair, I stayed up until almost 11 because my glue gun kept stringing little spider webs over the poster board and I wanted it to look clean. The next afternoon, I stood in the elementary school cafeteria under humming lights in a white polo shirt and navy skirt, waiting for my parents to come see it. I kept glancing at the double doors every time they opened. They were late because Camille had a dance rehearsal. By the time they arrived, judging was over. I had a blue ribbon taped to the corner of the board. My father barely looked at it before saying, "Good job, baby," then asking my mother if they still had time to get Camille to the studio. My mother took one photo of me, but her thumb covered half the lens. "You can't see my face in it. You can see the ribbon." That same year, Camille forgot the words to a solo at church, started crying on stage, then smiled through the rest of it while the piano player carried her. At home, my mother made enchiladas, my father bought a cake from H-E-B, and everybody talked about how brave she had been. Nobody ever made a cake for my blue ribbon. When I was 13, my father turned our back room into a bedroom for Camille because she needed space. It had the biggest window in the house, pale curtains, and enough room for a vanity my aunt found at a garage sale in painted cream. She got a comforter with tiny pink roses and a full-length mirror hung on the closet door. I got the old laundry room off the kitchen after my mother moved the washer and dryer to the garage. It was narrow and always a little too warm. The wall behind my bed vibrated when the refrigerator kicked on. There was no real closet, just a metal rod my father screwed into the wall for my school uniforms. My mother said I was lucky because the room was cozy, and because I didn't need much to be happy. One hallway in our house was lined with family pictures in brown frames. There were school portraits, church portraits, one awkward beach picture with all of us squinting. Camille appeared in almost every other frame. Sequined recital costume, freshman homecoming dress, soft focus senior photo. There was exactly one solo photo of me for years. In it, I was wearing braces and a stiff blue sweater, and my mother had tucked it half behind a calendar because she said the wall looked too crowded. On Camille's 16th birthday, my father drove home in a used white Volkswagen Beetle with a red bow taped to the hood. It wasn't new, but it was clean and cute, and it matched the version of Camille they liked to believe in. Pretty girl, big future, better things coming. There were balloons in the driveway. My mother cried. Camille screamed and jumped into my father's arms. On my 16th birthday the next year, I got a planner from Target, a set of gel pens, and a reminder to pick up my grandmother's prescription before the pharmacy closed. I'm not saying that to be funny. That is genuinely how the evening went. At dinner, my father looked at my planner and said, "This is good for you. Organized girls do well." Then he slid the car keys to Camille and told her not to forget to put gas in. The thing is, I was good at school. Not in the vague, family bragging way. In the real way. The steady way. I read fast. I remembered details. I liked systems, patterns, causes. I loved biology because nothing in a cell lied about what it was doing. If something was breaking down, you could follow the chain and find where it started. By the time I was 17, teachers were telling me to apply out of state, to honors programs, to scholarships I'd never heard of. I did most of my applications in the public library because our internet at home kept cutting out, and because if I tried to write an essay at the kitchen table, somebody would ask me to chop onions or answer the phone or help Camille straighten her hair before a date. The summer before senior year, I got invited to a week-long science camp at UTMB. It was mostly paid for, but there was a registration fee and gas money, and I needed closed-toe shoes for the lab. My mother told me we couldn't spare it. 2 days later, she paid for Camille's pageant headshots. When I said that wasn't the same thing, my father looked up from the sports section and said, "Your sister has opportunities too. Stop acting like the whole family revolves around you." That sentence settled somewhere deep in me. The whole family revolves around you. I think that was the first time I understood that asking for even the minimum would always be framed as selfish if Camille needed something prettier. And still, because children are built to hope in stupid ways, I kept thinking the next thing would change it. Maybe if I got better grades. Maybe if I stayed calmer. Maybe if I never raised my voice. Maybe if I became so obviously worthwhile, they would have no choice but to see it. When my college acceptance email came in, I was in the public library with a stack of SAT prep books beside me because I was helping a sophomore from church with math. The screen flashed, and I saw the words, "Congratulations," and admitted, and for a second, everything around me turned very quiet. I got into the University of Houston Clear Lake with scholarship money and admission into the pre-nursing track. I remember walking outside into thick, hot air with my phone shaking in my hand. I called my mother first. She didn't answer. I called my father. He did. "Dad," I said, laughing and crying at the same time. I got in. He was silent for one beat too long. Then he said, "Well, there you go." That night he brought home barbecue. My mother bought a cake with blue icing that said "Future Nurse" in cramped cursive because the bakery had run out of room. Camille took a selfie with it before I had even cut a slice. My father posted a picture of me holding the acceptance packet on Facebook. It was the first post he had ever made about me that wasn't a group family photo. The caption said, "Proud of my girl. First in the family to do this." My chest ached when I read it. I wanted to frame it. I wanted to live inside it. I wanted to believe that maybe achievement had finally translated me into a language they respected. But even that night, the hope felt unstable. Camille, who was already 21 and taking one class here and there when it suited her, lifted her wine glass and said, "Don't get cocky. Nursing school is hard. We'll see if Miss Perfect can actually finish something on time." Everybody laughed. I laughed too. That was what I did back then. I made myself smaller so other people could stay comfortable. College was never easy, even before the catastrophe. I commuted the first year to save money. I woke up before dawn, drove 40 minutes in traffic, sat through chemistry half awake, worked afternoons at a diner off Bay Area Boulevard, then studied at night until the words stopped making sense. I lived on gas station coffee and cheap yogurt, and the private thrill of getting A's anyway. The funny thing is, I was happy. Tired, yes. Lonely sometimes, yes. But there was a clean kind of happiness in moving toward a life I had chosen myself. On campus, nobody cared that Camille was prettier. Nobody cared that my family said I was the serious one like it was a flaw. Professors cared if I showed up prepared. Patients in clinical skills lab cared if I listened. In that world, precision was not a burden. It was value. By 24, I had fought my way through prerequisites, worked around 1,000 small money problems, and gotten accepted into the upper division nursing program. That was the moment of false hope that almost killed me. I had the letter in my hands. I had partial scholarship money. I had a seat in the program. I had a fall start date. I had been saving for years in a bank account my mother was still linked to, because my parents had opened it when I was a minor, and my father always said, "No daughter of mine needs her own private money." I had enough for tuition and books if I kept working. I thought I was finally safe. Then Camille got engaged. She met Brent Whitaker at an open house she was hostessing for a realtor friend. Brent came from the kind of family my mother talked about in lowered, impressed tones. Country club family. Private school family. Their Christmas photos looked like they had lighting crews. His mother wore pearls to lunch. His father had the kind of tan that said golf, not labor. Camille fell in love with the status before she fell in love with the man. I saw it happen in real time. Suddenly, our house was filled with wedding magazines, venue brochures, linen swatches, cake tastings, and words like timeless and elevated. My mother acted like she had been personally invited into a better class of life. My father walked around straighter. Camille had a ring big enough to catch across a room and a way of speaking that made every ordinary thing sound like production. She said the wedding had to be perfect because these people notice things. What she meant was that Brent's family had money, and she intended to keep them impressed long enough to build a future inside it. About 6 weeks before my nursing program started, I was on campus finalizing paperwork when my debit card got declined, paying a fee at the bookstore. I remember that moment with sick, unnatural clarity. The fluorescent light above the register, the stack of navy scrub tops on the counter, The girl behind the register chewing gum and avoiding my eyes after the second attempt. I stepped aside and opened my banking app. The balance on my account had dropped so low I actually thought I was looking at the wrong numbers. I checked again. Then again. My hands went cold. There had been a transfer out the day before. Almost everything. Years of savings. My summer work money. My refund money. My emergency cushion. Gone. I called my mother from the bookstore parking lot. She didn't answer. I called again. Then Camille. She picked up on the second ring and said, "Hey, can I call you back? I'm at a dress fitting." Why is my account almost empty? There was a beat. Then she laughed once. Not because it was funny, because she knew before I did. "Oh," she said. "Mom didn't tell you?" I felt the whole world tilt. "Tell me what?" She was supposed to explain. "Don't freak out, Nora." My teeth were clenched so hard my jaw hurt. "Camille, what did you do?" That silvery fake patience entered her voice, the one she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while setting something on fire. "It's not what I did. It's what the family had to do." I drove home shaking so badly I had to pull over once because I couldn't see. When I got there, bridal magazines were spread all over the dining table. Ivory roses in low vases, seating chart cards, my mother's good candle burning in the middle of the day. Camille was sitting in my father's chair with her feet tucked under her, flipping through linen samples. My mother was at the counter cutting limes. My father was home early, standing by the sink in his work shirt with the top buttons undone. They all looked up like they had been expecting me. I didn't put my bag down. "Put it back," I said. My mother set the knife down. "Nora, no, put it back." My father exhaled through his nose. "Watch your tone." My tone? My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. "You took my tuition money." My mother said, "We borrowed it." Camille jumped in before I could answer. "Exactly. Borrowed. God, don't make this dramatic." I stared at her. "You took my money." She crossed one leg over the other. There was a venue issue. I laughed once, and the sound that came out of me didn't sound sane. A venue issue. "The deposit was due," my mother said softly, like I was the one being difficult. If Camille lost the date, the whole thing could fall apart. I looked at my father. "Tell me this is a joke." He held my gaze for maybe 2 seconds before looking away. "It's a family need. My program starts in 6 weeks." "You can start next semester," Camille said. "No, I can't." I took the acceptance packet from my bag and slammed it onto the table hard enough to make the candle wobble. "My seat won't hold. The scholarship won't hold. Clinical placement won't hold. I told you this. I told all of you this." My mother folded her arms around herself, defensive already. "Don't throw papers at me." "You cleaned me out." Camille's face changed then. The sweetness dropped. "You are being unbelievably selfish." I actually took a step back. Selfish. Yes, selfish. This wedding matters, Nora. So does my life. She gave me a slow look up and down. "It's 1 semester. You act like if everything doesn't happen exactly on your schedule, the world ends." I could feel my pulse in my throat. "You used my money for flowers and a venue." "For my wedding," she snapped, like that made it noble. "For my future? For something that actually changes my life." "So does school." She leaned back and lifted one shoulder. "If it was really meant for you, you'd figure it out. Plenty of people work and go to school. You're not the only person who struggles." I looked at my father again. "Dad." He rubbed a hand over his mouth. "We'll pay you back." "When?" "After the wedding." "When after the wedding?" No answer. My mother said, "Don't force your father into a corner." I could hear the refrigerator humming, a dog barking 2 houses down, a drop of lime juice hitting the counter. My whole body felt detached, like my bones had gone loose inside me. "Do you understand?" I said slowly, because none of them seemed to understand plain language. That I cannot enroll without that money? Camille rolled her eyes. You're always so rigid. I'm rigid because deadlines are real. She gave a little laugh, mean and airy at the same time. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're just too slow for programs like that. You've been in college forever. That sentence hit me harder than the theft. Too slow. As if the years I had spent working and commuting and clawing my way through classes with no help were proof of weakness instead of endurance. My mother didn't correct her. My father didn't correct her. He only said, "Enough. We're not doing this all night." I stood there in the house where I had spent my whole life being useful, careful, restrained, and I knew with perfect clarity that they had already decided I was the one who should absorb the loss because they believed I would. That was the break. Not just the money, not just the program, the decision. The fact that all three of them looked at my future and chose table linens. I did not scream. I wish I could tell you I shattered the vase or threw the magazines or said something so sharp it sliced the air open and left them bleeding. I didn't. I picked up my papers with hands so numb I almost dropped them. I said, "You are not borrowing from me. You are taking from me." Camille opened her mouth. I held up my hand, and for the first time in my life, she actually stopped talking. "If I lose my seat," I said, looking at all of them one by one, "this is because of you." My mother's eyes flashed. "Don't you dare put that on us. We have sacrificed everything for you girls." "For us girls," I repeated. Then I walked out. I spent the next 10 days trying to save something that had already been killed. That matters to me. It still matters. Because when people tell the story now, when they soften it or say families are complicated or say, I should understand there were pressures, I remember the paperwork. I remember the phone calls. I remember how hard I tried. I met with financial aid and asked if there was any emergency override. There wasn't enough time. I called the bursar's office and begged for a payment extension. I got 1 week. I asked my manager at the diner for more shifts. He said he could give me Friday nights and Sunday brunches, but not thousands of dollars. I went to my grandmother and cried in her kitchen with the old fan clicking in the window. She pressed a dish towel into my hands and said she had some savings, but when we counted it, it wasn't even close. I wrote my parents a letter because every phone call turned into gaslighting. I attached the tuition bill, the program letter, the deadline, the consequences in plain language. I underlined the date. I wrote, I am not asking for a favor. I am asking for the return of my money. My mother signed for the certified mail. 3 days later, nothing. I texted my father, please answer me. I can still save this if you transfer it back today. He sent one reply. We need peace in this house right now. I called Camille and got sent to voicemail. I called again and got blocked. I emailed her from my school account. She replied 9 hours later with one sentence. Stop weaponizing my wedding because you're unhappy with your own choices. My Aunt Rosa called after my mother got to her first. Your mom says you're spiraling, she told me carefully. She says you're making this bigger than it is. I sat in my car in the parking lot outside my apartment complex with my forehead on the steering wheel and laughed until I started crying. I was not making it bigger than it was. It was exactly as big as it was. I lost the seat, then the scholarship, then the housing arrangement I had lined up with another student because I could not commit to rent without enrollment. I officially withdrew that month from a program I had fought toward for years because my family emptied my account to finance my sister's wedding optics. 3 weeks later, Camille posted engagement photos taken in a field at sunset. Her caption said, "Sometimes God's timing is perfect." The comments were full of hearts. I did not go to the wedding. Not because I wanted to punish her, because I could not stand upright in a room where people would toast a marriage partly bought with my erased future. Before the wedding, I tried one more time. I wrote my mother another letter. I wrote my father one too. I wrote separate letters because I wanted there to be no confusion later. I said I loved them. I said I was devastated. I said I needed them to do one of two things: return what they could, or tell the truth to the family about why I had to leave school. Both envelopes came back unopened. Refused was stamped in red across the front. I still have them. For the next year, every time somebody from church or an extended cousin asked my mother where I was, she gave a different version. Nora is taking a break. Nora got overwhelmed. Nora decided school wasn't for her after all. Nora was never good under pressure. Nora is figuring things out. Camille, according to two cousins and one aunt who eventually got tired of swallowing it, preferred a brighter line. Nora was always kind of slow finishing college. She said, "Not everybody is built for that track." Slow, like I had drifted, like I had failed by nature, like she hadn't put her manicured hand directly into my future and pulled. I kept trying at first. That is another thing I need people to understand. I sent updates when I enrolled in community college classes to rebuild the path. No response. I emailed my father when I made the dean's list. No response. I mailed my mother a Christmas card one year with nothing hard in it. Just Merry Christmas. I hope you're well. It came back with the forwarding line scratched through even though they had not moved. My grandmother became the only bridge for a while. She would call and say, "Your mama's still mad, but she asks about you." Or, "Your daddy saw a nurse on TV and said it made him think of you, but don't let that soften you too fast." Then she would sigh and ask if I was eating enough. When she died 2 years after the wedding, Camille texted me from an unknown number the night before the funeral. "Please don't make tomorrow about you." That was the message. Not "I'm sorry." Not "Grandma asked for you." Not "We should talk." Please don't make tomorrow about you. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at that screen for a long time. Then I typed, "I never did." I did go to the funeral. I stood at the back. My mother's mouth tightened when she saw me. My father hugged cousins, shook hands, accepted casseroles, never looked directly at me. Camille wore black silk and cried beautifully. Afterward, at the graveside, my Aunt Rosa touched my elbow and whispered, "They don't know how to talk to you now." I looked at the fresh dirt covering the only person in that family who had ever really seen me. "They knew before," I said. The lowest point of my life was not the day I lost nursing school. It was a Tuesday in February, 8 months later, in a one-room apartment above a laundromat where the walls sweated when the dryer vents kicked on. I had worked breakfast at the diner, then a short evening shift doing housekeeping at St. Catherine because the hospital job came with slightly better pay and the possibility, just the possibility, of tuition assistance later if I could hang on. I came home with bleach on my hands, grease in my hair from the diner kitchen, and a blister on my heel that had broken open in my shoe. There was a returned envelope pushed halfway under my door. I knew what it was before I picked it up. It was one more letter to my parents. One more attempt to say the thing clearly enough that maybe they could no longer pretend not to understand. Inside, I had included a copy of my new class schedule and a note that said, "I am still trying. I wish you were proud of me anyway." Refused was stamped across it. When I opened my fridge, there was half a bottle of ketchup, a bruised apple, and a carton of eggs one day past the date. The overhead bulb in the kitchen flickered twice and went out. I sat on the floor because there was nowhere softer to go. The laundromat below me rattled through the wall. Somebody outside laughed too loud. A siren passed somewhere far off. I had the envelope in one hand and my old acceptance letter in the other because I still carried it in my bag like a relic I couldn't bury. I cried so hard I got hiccups. Not graceful tears. Not movie tears. The kind that make your face hot and ugly and swollen. The kind that drain you until the crying stops because your body can't keep spending water like that. I remember looking up at the water stain on the ceiling and realizing no one was coming. Not my father with a transfer. Not my mother with remorse. Not Camille with a check and a confession. No one. There was something almost clean in that realization. I put the envelope down. I stood up. I washed my face in the bathroom sink because the shower drain backed up if I ran the water too long. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My hair was escaping its bun. There was bleach on my sleeve. I said out loud to that cheap mirror to myself, "Then you do it without them." Not dramatically, not as a speech, as a decision. That was the night I stopped confusing love with access. The years after that were not inspirational. I need to say that because people love to flatten survival into montage. Sad girl, 2 jobs, night classes, coffee, determination. Success? No. It was meaner than that. Slower, more physical. I worked breakfast shifts at the diner until my feet throbbed. I cleaned discharged rooms at St. Catherine at night. I learned how blood looks when it's drying in bright light, how vomit smells on hospital linen, how to move around sleeping families in dim rooms without waking them. I scrubbed bed rails and emptied sharps containers and picked up abandoned socks from under stretchers. When the diner manager quit, I lost hours and started doing grocery deliveries on weekends. I took anatomy and physiology one class at a time because that was what I could afford and survive. Some weeks I slept 4 hours a night. Some weeks less. There were days I was so tired driving home that I rolled all the windows down and slapped my own thigh at red lights because I was afraid of drifting across a lane. I ate peanut butter from the jar with a spoon. I wore the same black work shoes until the soles split. I ignored a tooth that needed a filling because rent was due. My period got irregular from stress and caffeine and not eating enough. I got so used to being hungry that full meals made me sleepy. I stopped going anywhere social because every dollar had a job and every ounce of energy belonged to work or school. People from high school would message me sometimes, "Girl, where have you been?" And I never knew how to answer without writing a full deposition. There was one semester when my transmission went, and I spent 3 weeks piecing together rides, buses, and one humiliating call to an old classmate I barely knew. I studied pharmacology flashcards at bus stops. I memorized cranial nerves while folding diner napkins. I wrote care plans on the back of receipt paper during breaks. And the whole time, pain sat under it like a battery. Every time I wanted to quit, I heard Camille. Too slow. Every time I wanted to skip an exam because I couldn't keep my eyes open, I heard my mother say, "Maybe you weren't meant for programs with deadlines." Every time I thought I might actually collapse, I saw my father looking away from me at that dining table. Pain is not noble, but it is efficient. St. Catherine changed my life in the ugliest and then the best way. I started there pushing supply carts and stripping sheets. After about a year, a supervisor moved me to the emergency department housekeeping team because I was fast, calm, and I did not freeze around blood. The ER was chaos, but it was honest chaos. It did not care who was pretty. It did not care whose mother had pearls. It cared if you noticed things. It cared if you could move. I noticed everything. The way triage nurses clocked the truly sick before the monitor showed it. The way experienced staff could hear respiratory distress in one sentence. The way a good nurse charted with one hand while steadying a frightened patient with the other. The pace, the precision, the hidden architecture of keeping people alive in bright, loud rooms. I used to linger over the supply room clipboard longer than necessary just to listen. That is where Inez Walker found me one night, leaning against the wall on my 15-minute break with a cup of vending machine coffee and a stack of physiology flashcards. Inez was the ER nurse manager. 50-something, silver threaded through her locks, voice like gravel and warm syrup at the same time. She had the kind of authority that made even arrogant residents lower their volume. She looked at my cards, then at me. "You in school?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "For what?" "Nursing." She took the top card from the stack, glanced at it, and handed it back. "Good. You move like you've got sense." I probably looked startled because she snorted. "That wasn't a compliment," she said. "It was an observation. There's a difference." A few nights later, she found me in the break room microwaving rice and beans at 1 a.m. "You studying to escape?" she asked. "Or studying to arrive?" I blinked at her. "I don't know what that means." "Yes, you do." I looked down at the microwave turning in slow circles. Arrive, I said. She nodded once. Good answer. Inez started asking me questions after that. Not the fake, nosy ones people ask when they want a clean tragedy they can shake their heads over. Real questions. What classes are left? What's your GPA? Why are you taking them in that order? Who's advising you? Are you applying to ADN or Accelerated BSN? Did you file FAFSA correctly this year? Did you appeal the dependency calculation? Why not? When I told her bits of the truth, not even all of it, just enough to explain the gap, she stared at me for a long moment and said, They stole time from you. Don't hand them the rest out of habit. She helped me apply for a patient care tech training spot at the hospital so I could move up from housekeeping. She showed me which internal scholarship applications were real and which ones were vanity brochures. She wrote me a recommendation that was so fierce I cried in the stairwell after reading it. Under her watch, I became a tech in the ER. That first night in Navy scrubs instead of environmental services khaki, I sat in my car in the parking garage and put my hand over my mouth because I thought I might scream if I didn't hold it shut. It wasn't the end goal, but it was closer. As a tech, I took vitals, cleaned wounds, moved patients, restocked trauma bays, ran specimens, learned the choreography of urgent care. I learned how scared men talk when they are trying not to show fear. I learned how mothers sound when something is wrong with a child. I learned that competence is a kind of mercy. I still worked too much. I still struggled. But now my work fed the exact dream I had been denied. Inez and her wife, Delilah, became the first people who ever made room for me without keeping score. The first Thanksgiving I could not bear to spend alone after my grandmother died, Inez called me at 9 a.m. You got plans? She asked. No. Now you do. 3 o'clock. Bring whatever pie you can afford or bring nothing. Delilah made too much food again. Their house smelled like sage, butter, and warm bread. There were books on end tables, framed photos of nieces and godchildren, a chipped ceramic bowl full of clementines by the sink. Delilah hugged me at the door like she had been expecting me for years. Nobody at their table told me to smile more. Nobody interrupted when I spoke. Nobody compared me to anyone. When Delilah asked how school was going, she listened to the whole answer. I nearly cried over the cornbread. I held it together out of pride, then lost it in their bathroom for about 60 seconds and came back with cold water on my wrists. When Inez drove me home, she turned down the radio and said, Being unchosen by the wrong people can save your life. I looked out the window at the dark highway lights blurring in the glass. I don't know how to stop wanting them to pick me anyway, I said. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, You don't stop all at once. You just build a life that doesn't collapse every time they don't. That sentence became a beam in me. I finished the prerequisites I needed. I got into an associate degree nursing program because my old credits still counted. I worked as a tech while I studied, slept in fragments, and learned to do hard things without announcing them. I passed meds and clinicals with hands that shook only afterward. I charted until my eyes blurred. I failed one pharmacology exam by 2 points, cried in my car for 7 minutes, then retook it and got a 94. When I graduated, there were no flowers from my mother, no proud Facebook post from my father, no text from Camille. Inez came in a red dress and yelled loud enough to embarrass me when they pinned me. Delilah brought white roses. After the ceremony, we went for tacos and cheap champagne in paper cups. I laughed so hard my face hurt. Then I took the NCLEX and passed. I became Nora Delgado, RN. 2 years after that, I finished my BSN online while working nights in the ER. Then I got my emergency nursing certification. Then I trained new hires. Then, one impossible inch at a time, I became somebody in that building. Not glamorous, not viral, not shiny in the way my family respected. Solid. When a trauma came in, people looked for me. When a new nurse panicked, I steadied the room. When a family needed truth without theater, I could give it. The first time a resident called me the spine of this place after a terrible shift, I went into the supply room and stood very still because compliments still startled me when they were earned. The wound, though, never fully left. There were nights after a good shift when I would sit in my car with my badge turned over in my hand and imagine texting my father a photo just to force him to say my title. There were times I almost mailed my mother one of the hospital newsletters that had my name in it after I got recognized for patient care. I never did, but the wanting was there. Not for reconciliation exactly, for witness, for them to know what I had become without them. About 6 months before the night everything broke open, I got a voicemail from my mother for the first time in almost 3 years. I almost deleted it without listening. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Nora?" she said, and then silence, like the name itself hurt. "Your father has been having some heart issues. Nothing immediate. Tests. Camille says not to bother you, but I thought you should know." That was all. No apology, no admission, just news. I listened to it 3 times. I did not call back. But it opened something old and dangerous in me. A little door I hated finding still unlocked. For the next few weeks, I checked the family group chat I hadn't left but had muted years before. There were photos of Camille's house, Camille's brunches, Camille's dog, my mother's roses, my father's new smoker. Nothing about his heart. Nothing honest ever went in that chat. It was a museum of surfaces. Then my cousin Adriana messaged me privately. "You know Uncle Hector collapsed at dinner last week and refused to go in, right?" I stared at the screen. "No," I wrote. She sent back a voice note. "Girl, don't tell them I told you. But they're playing stupid with his blood pressure and chest pain because Brent's family was there and your dad didn't want to make a scene." Of course he didn't. Respect over reality. Even at the edge of his own body. I thought about calling. I didn't. Partly because I was still angry. Partly because I knew how contact worked with them. One crack and they would flood through it without ever naming the damage. Then came the stormy Thursday. I was charged that night, which meant controlled madness from the minute I clocked in. We were down 2 nurses. The waiting room was full. A psych hold needed placement. A toddler had stuffed a bead so far up his nose the pediatric resident had started sweating. One of our nurses was crying in the med room because her husband had moved out that morning. We had a stab wound, 3 chest pains, and a woman in room 8 who kept trying to leave with her IV still in. By 2 in the morning, my scrub top was sticking to my back, and I had drunk coffee so bad it tasted faintly like pennies. Then EMS called in a 60-year-old male, chest pain, diaphoresis, syncope at restaurant, unstable en route. I cleared trauma 3. When the paramedics pushed the stretcher through the bay doors, I saw my father's face under the oxygen mask. For 1 second, the room narrowed to a pin. Then training took over. "On my count," I said. 1, 2, 3. We transferred him to the bed. Leads on. Pressure cycling. Line checked. Dr. Patel at bedside. Tech getting blood. Resident fumbling for the med list. Only after the first 2 minutes of pure motion did I hear my mother crying somewhere behind the curtain and Brent's voice trying to sound calm. I stepped into the hall and there she was. Camille. Cream silk blouse, rain on her hair, one heel strap half broken, still somehow carrying herself like an audience might materialize at any second. She stared at me in scrubs, at the stethoscope looped through my pocket, at the trauma room behind me, and instead of confusion or shame or anything human, she reached for control. That's when she grabbed my wrist and said, "Don't do this tonight. Do not put yourself in the middle of this and pretend you work here." Then the resident called my name. Then she looked down and read my badge. I watched the exact moment she understood that the story she had told people about me could not survive contact with fluorescent reality. Not with half the Whitakers in the waiting area. Not with staff moving around me like I belonged. Not with my name printed in black under the hospital logo. "What is this?" she whispered. I pulled my wrist free. "This is my shift," I said. My mother had come up behind her by then, face blotchy, lipstick cracked at the edges. Brent stood a few feet back with his mother, Paula Whitaker, who was wrapped in a camel coat over silk pajamas and looked offended by the existence of emergency medicine. Paula frowned at me. "Camille, who is this?" Camille's mouth opened, closed. It was Brent, not Camille, who answered. "This is Nora," he said slowly. "Her sister." Paula looked me over again, landing on the badge. Something in her expression sharpened. I did not have time for any of them. Dr. Patel leaned out of the trauma room. "Nora, family history?" So I turned, pulled the chartboard to my chest, and asked the question in the voice I use with every family member on the worst night of their lives. "What medications is he on right now?" My mother blinked at me like she had never heard me speak before. Camille said, "What?" "Medications," I repeated. "Blood pressure meds? Cholesterol? Blood thinners? Has he taken anything tonight?" My mother looked at Camille. Camille looked at Brent. Brent said, "I thought he was on something for pressure." My jaw tightened. My father's chest pain. My father's heart workup. My father's collapsed body. And none of them could answer a basic medication question. Lucinda started crying harder. "Can't you just go in and tell them to save him?" There it was. The pivot. The instant turn from dismissal to use. I kept my face still. "The team is with him," I said. "Answer the question." Between the three of them and a call to my aunt, we pieced together enough of his med list for pharmacy. Then Dr. Patel sent another charge nurse to take over the direct room, because once she realized the patient was my father, she was not going to leave that conflict hanging where liability could see it. That was fine. I had already done what was needed. But by then, the reveal had happened. There is a particular kind of silence wealthy people go into when information rearranges the social order of a room. That silence settled over Brent's mother first. She looked at Camille. "I thought your sister never finished school." Nobody said anything. Paula went on, slower now, as if she needed to hear the lie in daylight. "You said she bounced around jobs." Camille's whole face tightened. "This is not the time." "No," I said quietly. "It actually is." All four of them looked at me. I had imagined for years what I would say if I ever got a clean chance. In those fantasies, I was always colder, tidier, almost surgical. Reality felt simpler than that. Less rehearsed. More honest. Brent spoke first. "Nora, I'm sorry, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you were told I couldn't finish college," I said. My voice was calm enough to surprise even me. "What you were not told is that I left nursing school because my tuition account was emptied for Camille's wedding." Paula turned her head so fast the pearl at her earlobe flashed. Brent stared at Camille. "What?" Camille's face went hard. "Can we not do family drama in the middle of a crisis?" My mother made a little choking sound. "Nora, please." There were other families in that waiting area. A child sleeping across two chairs, a man with a bandaged hand, a woman praying quietly into her phone. And in the center of all that ordinary grief, my own family stood inside the story they had built for years and felt it collapse. "You told people I was slow," I said to Camille. "You told them I couldn't handle the program. You told them what was convenient after you took what was mine." "I did not take anything," she snapped. I looked at her. "Say that again in front of Brent." She hesitated. That hesitation was louder than anything she could have said. Brent's face changed. He took one step back from her, not dramatic, just instinctive, like distance had suddenly become information. "Camille," he said very quietly. "What is she talking about?" My mother stepped in, desperate now. "We meant to pay it back." Paula actually gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. "Excuse me?" And there it was. The sentence. The one that did more work than I ever could have. "We meant to pay it back." Not, "That never happened." Not, "She's lying." Not, "You misunderstand." We meant to pay it back. Brent stared at Lucinda, then at Camille. You told me your parents stretched for the wedding because they wanted to contribute, he said. Camille turned to him with panic, trying to dress itself as indignation. They did. It was family money. No, I said. It was my account. Paula's voice went icy. Lucinda, Hector took money from your daughter's education fund? My mother looked at the floor. I will never forget Camille's hands in that moment. She kept smoothing her blouse over and over, palms down over the silk, like if the fabric stayed flat enough, maybe the world would too. This is disgusting, Paula said. Camille whipped around. Don't talk to me like that in public. In public? Paula said. You've had no trouble using your family in public when it flatters you. Brent said my name again. Nora. I stopped him with one look. I was not there to comfort him for marrying a liar. I was not there to rescue my mother from embarrassment. I was not there to soften it for Camille because our father was sick. I was there because I was on shift, and because truth had finally arrived without needing my permission. A cardiology fellow came through the doors then and called for family of Hector Delgado. Everybody turned at once. The fellow gave a quick update. STEMI, cath lab, blockage, stabilized for transfer, next hour critical. He asked which family member would be the primary contact. My mother pointed at Camille by reflex. The fellow looked at me instead. Charge Nurse Delgado, he said. If you can help them understand the next steps before you hand off, that'd be great. I saw Camille flinch. She had spent years saying my name like a cautionary tale. Now a physician said it with professional trust. I explained the process. What a cath lab was. What they could and could not expect tonight. What symptoms mattered after. How visitation would work once he moved upstairs. I did it clearly, briefly, with the same tone I use for strangers. No extra gentleness, no cruelty. When I finished, nobody moved. My mother's mouth trembled. Nora. I clipped the chart to my board. I have patience. She actually reached for me then, as if panic had rewritten history for her, and she was still entitled to touch. I stepped back. That small movement landed harder than a shout. You can't just walk away, Camille said, voice low and furious. Not when Dad is in there. I looked at her fully for the first time since reading my own badge reflected in her eyes. I am not walking away, I said. I worked my shift while he was dying. Those are different things. The room went very still. Brent closed his eyes once. Paula looked like she wanted to leave her own skin. I turned and went back through the doors. When I hit the staff side of the ER, my hands started shaking so hard I had to brace them against the counter. Inez, who had come in early for another issue and somehow always appeared when the emotional weather shifted, took one look at me and said, "Bathroom, now." I followed her. In the tiny staff bathroom with the cracked tile and overbright mirror, I finally let one breath break. Just one. Inez handed me a paper towel. That them? She asked. I nodded. How bad? I let out a laugh that hurt. Worse for them than for me, finally. A corner of her mouth lifted. Good. Then she sobered. You okay to finish? I looked at myself in the mirror. Navy scrubs, badge straight. Eyes bright but not ruined. Yes, I said. And I was. Not because it didn't hurt, because the hurt no longer outranked me. The fallout started before dawn. By morning, Paula Whitaker knew enough to be cold in ways that ripple through upper-class families like weather fronts. Brent knew more because my Aunt Rosa, who had arrived around 4, saw the shape of the night in one glance and decided she was done protecting anyone, told him the whole story in the ICU waiting room over stale coffee. Not just the money. The letters. The lies. The too-slow line Camille had repeated for years. My aunt had copies of some of the texts because I sent them to her back when I was still trying to prove I hadn't vanished for no reason. I had forgotten that. She had not. By noon, 2 cousins had called me. One crying, one furious. By evening, 3 different relatives had texted some version of, "I didn't know that's what happened." That sentence did not heal anything, but it mattered, because silence had protected them. Truth stripped the varnish off. My father survived. He needed a stent, then observation, then a long, ugly recovery that forced him to confront the fact that his body did not care about pride. He could not swagger through rehab. He could not charm blood vessels open. For the first time in my life, I saw him weak in a way no one could deny. I did not become his nurse. I visited once after he was stable, on a day I was off, wearing jeans and no badge. When I walked into his room, he looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Hospital pale. IV taped to his hand. Telemetry leads dotting the chest I had once thought could hold up a whole house. My mother stood up so fast the chair legs scraped. "I can step out," she said. "You should," I said. She looked wounded by the tone, but she went. Then it was just me and my father. He looked at the blanket over his lap instead of at me. "Your aunt told me what happened out there." "No," I said. "She told Brent what happened. You've always known." That landed. He swallowed. After a while, he said, "I thought there would be time to fix it." I almost laughed. "After the wedding?" I asked. He winced. "No," he said. "After things calmed down." "Things calmed down for you," I said. I dropped out. He finally looked at me. His eyes were wet, and I had spent so many years fantasizing about that exact punishment, about them feeling something equal to what they did, that when it arrived, it felt less satisfying than I expected. More tired. "I was wrong," he said. I let the words sit there. He went on, voice rough. "I thought you'd recover because you always did. I thought Camille needed the bigger rescue. And I was just the one who could absorb the hit." He shut his eyes. I did not comfort him. After a long silence, he said, "I'm sorry." It was the first real apology I had ever heard from him. Not enough. Not magic. Not redemption. But real. "I believe that you're sorry now," I said. "That doesn't change what you did then." His face crumpled a little at that. Good. When I left the room, my mother was waiting in the hall, wringing a tissue to death in both hands. "Nora, please let me say something." I should have walked past her. Instead, I stopped because I was tired of ghosts and I wanted everyone living in plain speech for once. She whispered, "I was trying to keep the family together." "You kept Camille comfortable," I said. "That's not the same thing." Tears spilled instantly. "That's unfair." I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, "It's accurate." Camille did not come to the hospital the next day. Or the next. Brent came alone once. He asked if we could talk in the cafeteria. I said yes because I wanted to hear what he thought he was owed after building a life with a woman who had sharpened herself on me. He sat across from me with an untouched coffee and a face that looked newly older. "I didn't know," he said again. "I know." He rubbed his forehead. "Paula is furious." That sounds like a Whitaker problem. A brief, humorless smile. Probably. Then his face changed. "Did Camille really say that line? About you being slow?" "Yes." He stared at the table. "She says things at parties. About you. I always thought—" He stopped. "You always thought I was the family disappointment," I finished. He had the grace to look ashamed. I thought she was telling the truth. I leaned back. That's the thing about polished liars. They count on people enjoying the story enough not to inspect it. He nodded once. Then he said, "I'm sorry I helped carry that." That apology mattered more than I expected. Maybe because it named the function. Carrying. Everybody who repeated Camille's version had carried part of it for her. The social consequences spread through their world in exactly the ways my mother always feared. Quietly at first, then all at once. Camille's in-laws stopped inviting my parents to everything. Brent, who had been considering going in with Camille on a new real estate office under her brand, froze it. Paula told at least 3 women at their club because outrage is still gossip when it wears pearls. People at church started approaching my aunt instead of my mother for the real version. My aunt, who had been storing years of disgust like canned goods, gave it to them. One cousin told another cousin, who told his wife, who told the prayer chain. Within 2 weeks, women who had spent 6 years nodding sympathetically over my struggles were staring at my mother in the church parking lot with a new kind of silence. My mother hated silence she could not control. Camille's own professional image took a hit too. She had built part of her realtor brand around family warmth, loyalty, old values, pretty table settings, and strategic oversharing. Suddenly, people who knew the Whitakers knew there was a missing story under all that gloss. Nobody got canceled. Life is usually less cinematic than that. But trust shifted. You can feel when a room no longer reaches for you first. Brent moved out 3 months later. Not because of me alone. Marriages don't crack from one truth. They crack because one truth reveals the load-bearing lies underneath. Financial secrecy. Performance. A hunger for status strong enough to eat character. He filed for separation quietly, and by the time Camille understood that charm could not pull him back this time, the paperwork had already started. She called me 14 times the week she found out. I did not answer. Then came the late apologies. My mother sent a 4-page letter in blue ink, full of grief and God and motherhood, and the word misunderstood used in at least 3 different forms. Buried in paragraph 5 was the line, "I hope one day you understand I did what I thought was best with the options I had." That was the whole problem. What she thought was best had always somehow required my loss. My father sent a shorter letter. 1 page. No excuses. He included a cashier's check for part of what they had taken, adjusted for what he could liquidate without selling the house. On a separate slip of paper, he wrote, "This does not cover the years. I know that." That was the first thing he had ever given me that was honest enough to keep. Camille sent voice notes. Crying, then angry, then crying again. "You ruined my marriage." No, I thought. Truth ruined your marriage. I was young. She was 27 when she took my future and called me slow. Young was not the word. I was under pressure. So was I. I didn't think you'd still be this bitter. That one almost made me answer, because bitterness was such a lazy word for injury when it persisted beyond the timeline that was convenient for the offender. Instead, I blocked her. My mother tried to come to the hospital once. Security called upstairs because a woman in a beige cardigan was insisting her daughter worked here and she needed to just leave flowers. I had not told my family my schedule. I had not given them that access. When security asked what I wanted done, I said, "Send her away." Then I stood in the medroom with my back against the fridge until the shaking passed. Boundaries are not elegant when you first build them. They feel cruel, even when they are late. I talked to Inez about it after shift. She was washing an apple under the break room sink, listening in the way only wise people do, without rushing to fill silence. When I finished, she bit into the apple and said, "You know why children from homes like yours struggle with boundaries? Because guilt was the rent?" She pointed the apple at me. Exactly. I laughed despite myself. Then I said, "Part of me still wants to be the kind of person who forgives easily." Inez chewed, swallowed. Easy forgiveness is often just old training in a nicer dress. That stayed with me. Over the next months, I built rules. My father could contact me by email only. My mother could write, but I would not take surprise calls or visits. Camille had no access to me at all. If any of them wanted relationship, it would require 2 things: truth and respect for limits. No revisionist storytelling. No dropping by. No using emergencies to bypass accountability. No asking me for money, recommendations, or professional favors. My father, to my surprise, complied. He emailed updates about cardiac rehab, 1 paragraph at a time, awkward and plain. Once he sent me a photo of his blood pressure log and wrote, trying not to be stubborn. I stared at that sentence for a long time. It was the closest he had ever come to self-knowledge. My mother kept testing the fence. A call from a new number here. A gift basket there. A cousin sent to see if I was ready yet. Each time I sent the same response. This is not how access works anymore. Slowly, she started to understand that I meant it. About a year after the hospital night, my father asked if we could meet for coffee. I almost said no. Then I pictured him in rehab, shoulders smaller, learning how to walk on a treadmill without pretending he wasn't tired. I thought about the cashier's check. I thought about the one honest line. This does not cover the years, so I said yes. We met at a place halfway between my apartment and his, a neutral coffee shop with concrete floors and plants hanging in the window. I chose the table near the front door. Old instincts. Easy exit. He arrived 10 minutes early. He looked older, not just because of the heart attack, because pride had finally lost enough blood to show bone underneath. He stood when I walked in. That almost undid me more than the apology had. We sat. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup and said, "I won't ask for more than you can give." I nodded. Good. He looked down, then up again. I told your mother if she wants any chance with you, she has to stop saying she did her best. I blinked. What did she say? He gave a small, bitter exhale. That I was taking your side. For some reason, that made me laugh. A short, sharp sound. He almost smiled too, then lost it. After a while, he said, "You know I was proud when you got into school. I know you like telling people." He took that hit without complaint. I did, he admitted. And I should have been proud in the ways that cost me something, not just the ways that made me look good. There it was again. Honesty. Late, but not false. We talked for 40 minutes, about his meds, about my shifts, about nothing huge. He asked where I lived. I told him only the neighborhood, not the address. He did not push. When we stood to leave, he said, "I'm sorry I taught your sister that your life was negotiable." That was the deepest apology of all, because it named the mechanism, not just the event. I did not hug him. I said, "Thank you for saying the true thing." Then I left. As for Camille, the last time I saw her in person was at my grandmother's old church during a memorial mass my aunt sponsored. She arrived late, still beautiful, still carrying herself like cameras might be hidden in the candles. Divorce had made her thinner, not softer, just sharper at the edges. She caught me near the side exit after service. "Nora." I kept walking. She moved in front of me. "Please, 2 minutes." I looked at her over the folded service program in my hand. She swallowed. "I was horrible to you." "Yes." Her face twitched. She had probably hoped for something gentler, something that let her build momentum toward absolution. "I was jealous," she said. That surprised me enough to keep me still. "Of what?" She gave a broken little laugh. "Of the way you could build things that were real. Everybody always acted like I was the special one, but I knew they trusted you more. They just needed me more loudly." For the first time in my life, Camille sounded tired instead of theatrical. "I thought if I got married right," she went on, "if I locked in the life, then all of it would settle. And when it didn't, you used me." Tears filled her eyes. Yes. I believed her. That did not make me want her back. She took a breath. "I am sorry." I looked at her. This woman who had been handed softness and still reached for theft, who had used my silence as furniture for her life, who had called me slow when I was carrying weights she never even touched. I felt something surprising then. Not forgiveness exactly. Relief. Because I finally understood that her cruelty had never been proof of my lack. It had always been evidence of her hunger. "I accept that you're sorry," I said. Hope flickered across her face too fast. Then I finished. "That is not the same as trust. And it is not a reset. The hope died. Good. You do not get my phone number, I said. You do not get my home. You do not get to come near my work. If you ever tell that lie about me again to anyone, I will answer it publicly with receipts. If there is ever any relationship between us, it will be small, slow, and on terms you do not control. Do you understand me? She stared at me, then nodded once. I stepped around her and walked out into bright afternoon sun. My life now is not perfect. I don't say that because I'm humble. I say it because perfection is another performance trap, and I spent too long being managed by other people's need for a clean story. I work too much sometimes. The ER still follows me home in flashes, monitor tones in dreams, the smell of saline in my hair, the memory of a mother's hand gripping mine while a team worked on her child. Some nights I sit on my own couch in my own apartment, badge on the table, city lights in the window, and feel the old grief move through me like weather. But the difference is this. The weather does not own the house anymore. I have a kitchen with yellow light and a kettle that whistles too loud. I have framed prints on the wall that I chose because I liked them, not because they made anything look expensive. I have a drawer full of pens that all work. I have a plant that keeps surviving my schedule. I host Thanksgiving now, and Inez and Delilah come early and criticize my pie crust like it's their sacred duty. I have friends who know the original version of my story and still call me difficult when I need to be, which is a form of love I did not grow up with. My father and I have coffee every other month. My mother is still on probation with reality. Some days she manages it. Some days she drifts toward excuse and I end the conversation. She is learning that tears are not key cards. Camille remains far away. Occasionally, my aunt will mention that she's living in a smaller place now, working harder than she used to, quieter on social media, less glitter, more plain. I do not ask for details. I do not need her suffering to season my peace. The delayed justice people dream about usually looks louder than the real thing. It is not always a courtroom. Not always a public speech. Sometimes it is simply this. The person who called you nothing has to read your name where they can't deny it. The family that erased your effort has to watch strangers trust you with what they love. The people who treated your future like spare change have to learn that your access is now the expensive thing. The night Camille read my badge, I did not become worthy. I only became visible in a language she respected too late to control. That is why the ending matters. Not because they finally saw me, because I stopped needing that sight to become my life. So if you are the daughter who was easy to spend, easy to blame, easy to forget while someone brighter burned through everybody else's mercy, hear me clearly. You are not hard to love because the wrong people found you useful first. And if they ever do come back, with apologies folded into flowers or heart attacks or holidays, or the sudden hunger of people who realize you built a life without their permission, you do not have to open the door just because they finally learned how to read your name.